everybody, from Common Room Radio. I'm Sarah K. Pazant, and good is not a thing you are. It's a thing you do.
I'm Alistair Stevens, and oh my God, your old costume! It looks great!
Who am I? It seems like an easy question. And then I realize maybe what I said to those cops wasn't a joke. Maybe the name belongs to whoever has the courage to fight. And so I tell them who I am. You can call me Vinton Bing.
And this week on Excelsior, we are doing Miss Marvel, the first trade written by G. Willow Wilson and drawn by Adrian Alfona. Alfona? And I love this series. I love this series so much.
Absolutely.
Yes.
This is the 2014 volume 1, which collects issues 1 through 5, the origin story of Miss Marvel. It also collects the all-new Marvel Now .1 Miss Marvel story.
Mm-hmm. So this is the introduction of a brand new character. This is the introduction of Kamala Khan. She is magnificent. We are going to rhapsodize about her for the next hour and a half here on Excelsior. I think we're all agreed in this. Sarah, when did you hear about this version of Ms. Marvel?
You know, I really wish that I could remember when that happened, and I really, really don't. I know that I hadn't started reading Miss Marvel until... probably after I was reading Patsy Walker, aka Hellcat, which we talked about was like the first comic that like I got into. And I think that just like starting to get into comics and reading about comics and hearing about comics, I heard that Miss Marvel was fantastic and that, you know, it was just one of the, and I like several of, I mean, God, we're already on like trade like 7 at this point here in 2017. And so I had heard a lot just about like how good it was and how it was just absolutely beautiful. And we've got this whole brand new character and it's like a really good jumping off point. So I think that I actually ended up picking up like the first 3 trades and then did not read them for months. Like just had them on my shelf. And finally one day was like, okay, if I'm going to keep getting these, I need to actually read them. And I'm so glad that I did. What about you guys?
So I first discovered her in the Marvel .1 that they did to introduce the character to readers. They were doing these for a while, every year or 2 years, maybe a year and a half, somewhere around there, to just introduce people to the new comics that they were doing because they were revamping the universe. They were introducing new heroes, new titles.
Sure.
And they were basically just collections, like mixtapes of stories that wouldn't actually appear in the comics themselves, but would lead you into wanting to read the comic and sometimes follow up, in this case, on the comic. It kind of works as an issue 5.5.
Sure.
Even though it's supposed to introduce you to the comic because it doesn't actually spoil anything or give anything away.
Okay.
Sure.
And when I first read it, I remember just really falling in love. As Chris Sims often says, that Marvel has attempted to recreate Spider-Man each decade since they first created their flagship character in the 60s. And I think that they finally did it with Miss Marvel. This hero is exactly what everyone fell in love with Spider-Man for. A relatable character dealing with real world problems. Her culture and religion are not a gimmick. Instead, it's the crux of the story's theme of identity. And it's hard not to fall in love with Kamala and to care for her after these first few issues. The problems she faced might not be the same that the reader will face specifically, but in general, these are the problems that everyone has to face with identity and deciding who you're going to be and what it is to do good and what it is that is the purpose of your life, what defines you. And so it's really beautiful to see this character. And when you look at it, this is exactly what makes a Marvel character so iconic in the past, what they've done with Marvel characters. That's what makes that character stand out. And here they finally did it again. I think it's been a while since they created a character that was so iconic and so stand out in that Marvel way. And I think Miss Marvel definitely does that for sure.
Agreed.
Yeah, that combination of interesting powers, but also human frailty. You're absolutely right. It's the Spider-Man archetype. It's the archetype that underpins the entire X-Men line of books. And Kamala absolutely belongs in that order for me. I was aware of Kamala right from the first announcement, right at the end of 2013. And Marvel kind of were a little cautious, I think, about this character, our first major Muslim American character in the 616 universe, because they announced this book in November of 2013, and then the book launched in February of 2014. That is very, very short for a Marvel PR turnaround. But she was immediately iconic. Borrowing the Ms. Marvel name, I think, is really interesting. This is the kind of thing that we do in DC all the time. DC's big contribution to superheroics has been the legacy title, where superhero names will pass from one generation to the next or be held simultaneously by 14 different Green Lanterns, I suppose. But we don't generally do that in Marvel. Generally speaking, each new character gets a new superheroic identity. And the way that the first volume of Ms. Marvel in particular plays off of Carol Danvers and her reputation is really powerful, really compelling. I love that this is street level superheroics, genuinely street level superheroics. And you don't get much more street level than Jersey City, arguably.
Yeah.
So for me, Kamala was an immediate hit. I read the first issue when it came out and just loved her. I thought that I had read a lot more than I had, actually. It turns out I'd only read maybe the first 3 or 4 issues and adore this character. This is going to be another ongoing series that I try and catch up with when I have a free moment.
Yes.
And just so people don't get confused, they did renumber Miss Marvel after I think the first 20 or so issues because they did Secret Wars and then they relaunched it and renumbered it. So be careful to pick up the 2014 version. That is what we will be talking about here today.
Yes, the trade entitled No Normal.
Yes.
That is the trade that we're discussing here.
So let's flip over the VHS. And I know that this term might not work is exactly when we're talking about the comics and not the movies, but I'm going to still keep using it because it's a lot better than flip over the book. Come on, guys. And I'm not going to do that. So let's flip over the VHS. An immigrant Muslim girl superhero, and she ain't even drawn in an overtly sexual manner? What is all this PC trash? Just what comics need. More SJWs. Not in my America. The white man is an oppressed minority. Whoa! Get out of here, dude. Okay, I don't know who that was.
We have got to start locking the studio.
Yeah, I know.
That's not good.
Let's take that from the top.
Get out of here, internet man.
Kamala Khan has always felt different. As a young Pakistani American, she is struggling to figure out who she is when her family, society, and her dreams all tell her to be different things. She spends her free time writing fan fiction about the Avengers, but little does she know, her life is about to turn into the ultimate fan fiction dream. A comic so wonderful, it's kind of hard to make jokes about. Meet your new favorite superhero, Plastic Girl. I mean, Miss Marvel. So as we mentioned on the onset, this comic is written by G. Willow Wilson, who began her career writing at the age of 17 when she freelanced as a music and DJ critic for Boston Weekly's Dig magazine. Since then, she's written the Eisner Award-nominated comic book series Air and Mystic, The 10th Apprentice, and the graphic novel Cairo. Her first novel, Alif the Unseen, was a New York Times notable book, and she spent her mid-20s living in Egypt and working as a journalist. Her articles about the Middle East and modern Islam have appeared on the New York Times Magazine, Atlantic Monthly, and the Canada National Post. Her memoir about life in Egypt during the waning years of the Mubarak regime, The Butterfly Mosque, was named a Seattle Times Best Book of 2010.
That's fantastic. That's amazing.
She's an extremely talented and extremely self-aware and politically aware and socially aware writer. She's a real talent to watch.
Yeah, absolutely.
The artist on this book is Adrian Alfona. And again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right.
We're doing our best.
Best known for his work on Marvel Comics' The Runaways, which he co-created with Brian K. Vaughan. And that's exactly what got me so excited about him doing the art on this book when I found out he would be involved.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was so very excited about it.
The art in Ms. Marvel, I think, is even a step better than his art in Runaways.
Oh, yeah, I would
It's
agree.
so skillful. It's so expressive.
Yes.
He's not afraid of leaning into, but also leaning back from comic convention. There are scenes of absolute mundanity here that he portrays in a very naturalistic style, in a very expressive and comic book friendly naturalistic style. But then there are moments of great action, moments of absolute excess, which I think serve this character really beautifully. He's very connected to Kamala's POV and her account of her adventure.
And I don't know whether I have him or Wilson to thank for all the jokes in the backgrounds of these panels, but if you will just take a moment as you read through this, there are jokes hidden all throughout the backgrounds of all the items. GMO cereal, listen to your gut, not the lawsuits. You have a whole section of magazines in one, my favorite of which is the Dropkick Enthusiast. And then you have a calendar hanging up at one point that says Thugs at Brunch 2014 calendar. You know, those are just a few of my favorites. There are dozens of just little jokes hidden throughout.
I think my
panels.
favorite is the sign that's on right there on the cash register in the very second panel of the comic that says cashiers are not interested in your stories.
I kind of want that just in real life.
Yeah, having worked many cash registers, I can say. So this comic was colored by Ian Herring, illustrator colorist who works out of Raid Studio, which is a fantastic studio of creators. I interviewed Ramon Perez from Raid, who often works with Ian for Read Brave. He has worked on...
so cool.
He's worked on Jim Henson's Tale of Sand with Ramon Perez, as well as on Nova with Perez and Hawkeye with Perez, as well as Silk, and then, of course, Miss Marvel. So he's done a lot of comics that I really, really enjoy.
That's
So
awesome.
I really appreciate his
And
coloring
that's
here.
the colorist,
yeah,
you said?
and he does a fantastic job with colors. My favorite coloring he's ever done is in the Nova series. It is just superb. It's the most beautiful coloring I've seen in the comic, I think, in a long
That's
time.
fantastic.
Now, this character, this is something we don't mention too often, but there's two editors that were involved in creating Miss Marvel here. Stephen Wacker and Sana Amanat. Again, pronunciation. It's very hard when you've never heard them pronounce. The latter of which presented Barack Obama with a copy of Miss Marvel Volume 1 at the reception for the Women's History Month, which I thought was pretty fantastic.
Amazing.
Very great.
Sana, as a Muslim herself, talked about creating the character and saying, I was telling Wacker some crazy anecdote about my childhood growing up as a Muslim American. He found it hilarious. She has also commented that the character was born based upon, quote, desire to explore the Muslim American diaspora from an authentic perspective.
Yes.
And I think that's what's done here. So I think those two editors do have a bit of credit to be given for the creation of this character, for sure.
Whenever you're representing a subaltern community, a subaltern culture, particularly in the frame of comic books, there are two distinct issues. There is actual authenticity, but then there is the feel of authenticity, the ability to communicate that authenticity to a reader that isn't familiar with that culture. I think that this book just bats 1,000 in both regards.
Yeah.
It feels astonishingly authentic and never either trivializes or sensationalizes that Muslim American experience. The naturalism with which that's handled is really beautiful and a major contributor, I think, to the success of this first volume, because it does root Kamala Khan in her world, in her family, in her culture, and it's just lovely.
So let's talk about the history of this character, which there isn't any. This is her first appearance, guys. This is the first time we've had to do this, where I don't have a ton of comic book things to talk about. We could talk about Carol Danvers' history as Miss Marvel, but that's actually completely irrelevant to our story, and those details don't really matter as it goes into who Kamala is and who Kamala becomes.
Except to the degree that Carol Danvers has been a hero in the 616 for a long, long while, and is one of the more recognizable heroes associated with the Avengers, associated with Marvel Cosmic. She has changed her name 53 different times. She has changed her costume 153 different times. She's pretty great.
Yeah. Carol Danvers is now known as Captain Marvel, once known as Miss Marvel, dressed quite differently when she was Miss Marvel, and she is an iconic hero who is idolized by Kamala, and that's pretty much all you need to know going into this story.
That'll do it.
Literally everything I know about Carol Danvers / Captain Marvel comes from our Marvel heroic role-playing game where our friend Alan role-played as Carol Danvers. And that, to me, is the only canon acceptance of how Carol is supposed to be portrayed.
You don't know that Carol Danvers is the origin story for Rogue's superpowers in the X-Men?
No, I don't know that.
She absorbed Carol's powers. This is why Rogue, whose mutant ability is the ability to absorb other power sets by touch, she can fly and has super strength and has all kinds of other abilities because she absorbed them. She took them permanently from Carol back in the 1980s.
That's so bizarre.
Yeah.
So most people
great.
knowing Rogue just from the X-Men animated series only know Rogue as a flying super strength mutant that can also touch people and take their powers.
Yeah, no, that was why I had no idea.
It's pretty OP, Rogue. We're going to have to nerf you, I'm afraid,
Yup,
if we're
I
going
think
to
so,
really
yes.
make you a major player in the 616.
Oh, Shug.
Oh my god.
So let's dive into the story, starting with issue 1 here. Kamala is smelling bacon at the local convenience store, and her friend Bruno, who is working there, says, "Eat the bacon or don't. There is no smell." Thanks, Yoda.
Delicious, delicious infidel meat. This is it, though. Right here, first page, we get a perfect introduction to Kamala.
Yes.
She is absolutely grounded, absolutely self-aware, connected to her community, but also to the other communities that form this cultural melting pot that is Jersey City. It's beautifully done and very, very skillful.
We are introduced to Nakia, who does not want to be called Kiki anymore, apparently. And in walks Zoe and her meathead boyfriend. Zoe immediately shows who she is by being overly enthusiastic and slightly looking down on everyone.
Yeah, what is it that Bruno calls her? The compassion troll?
Yeah.
Which is exactly what she is. And it's really gross to see because this is a real thing. This isn't the joke. This is reality.
It's very ugly. Though we play it primarily as a joke in this first beat, it's only going to really be revealed when we get to the party later. But Nakia gets this line in this opening scene: "You're such a baby, Kamala. She's only nice to be mean."
Yeah.
Which is such a beautiful observation of that kind of character.
It is. It's really interesting because here you don't have like a copy of Flash Thompson. She's not a bully per se.
Yeah.
She is maybe an ignorant white girl who walks in not knowing anything, feeling slightly better than the people around her. And I mean, Kamala looks up to her, thinks she's being nice,
Mm-hmm.
but there is something about that where she's not even willing to ask questions or learn or be friends with anybody. She just so much is stuck in her own world.
Yeah, everything that she says, it's constantly like, oh, okay. I mean, like, are you allowed to do that? They're not like locking you up. She's talking to
Right.
Nakia about, the headdress that she's wearing, and it's like nobody forced you. They're not gonna honor kill you, right? It's like you have got to stop, white girl, quit it. I'm so ashamed of like just you and everything you represent right now.
Yeah, we get that most telling line from Zoe when Nakia says, actually, my dad wants me to take it off. He thinks it's a phase. And Zoe replies, really? Wow, cultures are so interesting.
Yeah.
This is an opportunity to learn something. This is an opportunity to better yourself. And you are declining that invitation, Zoe. You are the worst.
Yes.
So the two newcomers invite our trio of friends to a party that night. And later that night, Kamala is working hard on some Avengers fan fiction. I love the sharp cut we get there. We see this goofy, cartoonish Avengers fighting. I think that Captain America may be wielding some kind of lightsaber.
It appears to be, it's some sort of weird crystalline club sort of thing. I don't know.
yeah.
Carol also
has one. I think they're
Yeah.
they're crystal outcroppings that have been taken.
And they're
here.
fighting against some knockoff My Little Ponies, My Little
Yeah.
Horsies.
Yep.
One of them shouting, "No, he killed Rainbow Toots."
Rainbow Toots is an excellent alternative name for one of the My Little Ponies. I wonder here if G. Willow Wilson, I mean, obviously she has at this point read Runaways. I wonder to what degree she is influenced by Runaways, because this is very, very similar to that opening scene of Runaways where the heroes are playing the online role-playing game of the Avengers.
Okay,
And
we're
we
going to have
get-
to read the Runaways at some
We-
point.
we
right?
absolutely
So
are.
I think we first said that in episode 2 of Excelsior.
Okay, great.
So it's
that
been a
will
long
be
time
said.
coming, but yeah, we'll definitely get to that.
well, you're about to go on vacation, so we'll have to wait.
Well,
But
I can read it on vacation, maybe.
We'll Skype
Reread
you
it,
in.
I
It'll
should
be
say.
fine.
Yeah. It is dinner time at the Khan household, and Kamala's mother does not understand what fan fiction is. Her brother is very zealous in his religion, to the annoyance of their father, because it keeps him from getting a job.
Yes.
Kamala asks her father if she can go to a party, and she is shot down and sent to her room after a little bit of arguing. Frustrated, she sneaks out anyways.
How does that turn work for you where her father suddenly seems to lose his temper? Did that feel authentic to you? Because in the panel right before he loses his temper, he tells Kamala, who is complaining in typical teenage fashion, I'm going to die. He says, you will not die. Look at your friend Bruno working hard for his family and getting top grades. Does he complain? To which Kamala replies, Bruno's a boy. If I was a boy, you'd let me go to the party. May I be excused? And then her father just loses his temper. You are excused, straight to your room and stay there until you find your manners.
I totally get this because teenage girls are vexing as hell is the thing.
Well-
I guarantee that Kamala is and like it's absolutely true to the character because she's what, like 15, 16,
16,
maybe
yeah.
17 years old. But yeah, 16-year-old girls who feel like they're not getting their way and are not getting the things that they want are the worst human beings on the planet. So I guarantee that she is just being over the top, being really snarky, being really snipey, and just really, I think just being like extra rude. He says, you're excused to your room till you find your manners. And there's no way that she's having like just a discourse about like, no, if I was a boy, you would let me go. Like she is straight up like bitching in this scene.
That's fascinating because this is like comic book literacy. This is why comic books are so important, and skilled artists can communicate emotion through the art itself. In the panel where she's saying Bruno's a boy, we can't see her face because she has her back turned to the camera, if you like. So it's possible to interpret that as a kind of a reasonable argument, but also possible to interpret it as a petulant whine.
Also,
Yes.
the lettering is done well there because boy is emboldened, which makes me read it like, but Bruno's a boy.
Yeah.
If
Yeah, that's
I
fair.
was a boy, then you would let me.
Yeah.
And also, you got to remember, this is coming right off of her father's argument with her brother about not having a job. And then her mother comes in and sticks up for the brother, saying, leave him alone, he'll find a job. And so the father's already frustrated with his family. And then she's putting this out there. And,
And Kamala was late to dinner anyway because she was working on fan
Right.
fiction.
I guess partly this stands in contrast to the dynamic that we'll see later in
Yes.
Kamala's family, where her mother is the much more controlling, much more domineering
Sure,
force,
yeah.
and her father seems to be more sympathetic, which is why
I
this
love Kamala's
particular
dad.
turn doesn't quite
Yusuf
work.
Khan is my
Yeah,
hero.
Yusuf's
He's
amazing.
so
Yeah,
good.
he is.
He does lose his temper here, but I have to think that this isn't the first time that Kamala has done this at the table. Been
True.
like, let me do this thing. Why don't you ever let me do what I want? And it's just typical teenager. It's
Yeah.
really what
Yeah.
it is. is.
Yeah.
My family never like had food around a table, and so we always, had TV trays and were watching The Simpsons while we had dinner. So we never had like these family conversations. So this is something that's very foreign to me, but I can absolutely imagine that, just like what Vinton said, this is not the first time that Kamala has kind of like whined about, why don't you let me be normal? Everybody else, all of my other friends have a cell phone. Why won't you give me a cell phone too?
Right.
Yeah, and tying this back to Peter Parker as Spider-Man, of course, even in his original appearances, when Peter Parker is to a surprising degree like an unlikable nerd. Peter Parker originally was not the charming, quippy figure that we see
that's
later.
who he is
Yes,
under the mask. And that's the
exactly
way
right.
that Spider-Man should be written. He's a nerd whenever he's Peter Parker, and people are just like, the nerdy dude makes me cringe.
Yeah.
And then when he's Spider-Man, he's a likable, funny guy.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And Kamala has some of that too. But while her battle is very different from Peter's battle or from other characters of this type, it is as true.
Yes.
It is as authentic. She just wants to be normal, whatever normal means. And normal when you're 16 is always that thing that is just out of reach. It's that thing that you can't quite get.
Yeah. When you're 16, everything that you aren't is what's normal. No 16-year-old believes that they are normal.
Again, we will see very interesting perspectives on that when we read Runaways Volume 1.
Yes. Exciting.
So Kamala arrives at the party with a bunch of teens, a bunch of popular kids. She's exactly where she wants to be, having snuck out. And she sees Zoe, who does greet her and say, "Oh my God, I can't believe you made it. I can't believe that you got out of lockup to hang out with us heathens."
Yes, Zoe is
Damn it,
the
Zoe.
worst. Yes. And then we get Josh giving her orange juice that also contains vodka.
Yeah, but only saying orange juice as she's drinking
Yes.
it, and then saying plus some vodka as it's in her mouth, and she spits it out, and all
Yeah.
the popular kids around her are laughing.
This drives me nuts because I'm pretty sure that Kamala is probably like a sophomore. All these kids, everybody is taller than she is. Like I know
Yeah.
that Kamala is kind of short, but I mean like even Nakia is significantly taller than she is, and I feel like all of her friends are probably like a grade or two up, and so these are like juniors and seniors who are like screwing with this freshman sophomore kid because they know they can get away with it,
Right.
and not just because she's Muslim or Pakistani or whatever, but because like she's younger than them and all like just they're just kind of being dicks right now.
They'd be picking on this kid for some reason. It's not about the fact that she's Muslim American. That's
Right.
just an interesting, strategy for attacking.
Sure. Well, and they would even say that, like, no, that's not what we're doing. I mean, like,
Yeah.
cultures are so interesting, says
Culture's
Zoe.
just
Yeah.
so interesting.
And then, of course, Bruno steps in, standing up for Kamala, saying, "What is wrong with you, Josh?" And of course, he makes fun of Bruno. And then Zoe says, "Well, Kamala, you smell like curry, so I'm going to stand somewhere else."
Zoe's the worst.
And then you'll notice in the background, as Bruno and Kamala walk away, the jocks are chest bumping each other for the sweet joke they just played.
Ugh, God, they're the worst.
The worst. I love that even in 2014, you can identify this character archetype by the addition of a Letterman jacket.
Yep.
That's all you need. That's
Yeah.
all you need. That just means meathead in comics.
Yeah, since the 50s.
It's perfect.
Right?
Yeah, since the 50s.
It's basically an Archie comic.
Yeah, exactly.
70 years of being able to identify the jock.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting pull because this does, in many ways, feel like an Archie comic. It does feel like
Oh,
it's
really?
a real
Yeah,
slice of
absolutely.
life, kind of down to or that side of this story.
Sure.
feels very kind of comedically naturalistic in exactly the way that an Archie comic would.
Okay,
yeah.
great.
Bruno saves Kamala ungracefully, telling her that she shouldn't have come, and upsets her. Kamala runs away from the party, and that's when the Terrigen mist comes rolling in.
Well, just the mysterious mist. We don't really get an account of this.
Right.
If you don't know what the Terrigen mist is, if you don't know about Terrigenesis, there's some stuff in this book that would
I
be a little
had
baffling.
I think that whenever I started reading this, I had just seen the parts in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. where we were dealing with Terrigenesis and like the
Okay,
mist and all that. So
sure.
like that, I did understand that. This is not something where I was like, comics, I don't know. I was like,
Right,
no, I know what this is. She's an Inhuman. Okay, great. Yay.
Yeah, if you're reading only Miss Marvel, this almost doesn't make sense. You're just like, okay, magic mist. I don't
Magic
understand.
mist.
And they're not going to bring it up in this volume.
She's
again
in a cocoon.
to explain it.
Okay, then has
sure,
powers.
yeah.
Excellent.
In every Marvel comic going on at the time, this same thing is happening left and right. This is coming straight out of a comic called Infinity, where a Terrigen mist bomb was set off. This is where this mist is coming from. But all you really need to know is that this is a mist that gives Inhumans their superpowers.
Yes, and Inhumans prior to Terrigenesis are completely indistinguishable from regular humans. This
Right.
is just a magical MacGuffin to give a bunch of kids powers.
Yeah.
But it was connected to Marvel's real desire at the time to make the Inhumans a thing. Good luck with that, Marvel. It's been like 20 years. You've never had any success with it. Nobody cares about the Inhumans.
This is the point in the comics where they really fought hard to make the Inhumans a thing because they didn't have the X-Men and didn't know what to do with themselves.
Yeah, because they don't have specifically the movie rights to the X-Men.
Right.
So they couldn't make
see.
movies of the X-Men stories because those rights are owned outright by Fox. So they're trying to make the Inhumans a thing so that they can have a whole new cast of characters to tell stories about. Have you guys incidentally seen the trailer for the Inhumans?
I have very mixed feelings.
I didn't know that there was a trailer out already.
Extremely mixed feelings. Let's pause this recording and show Sarah the trailer
Yes, please.
for the Inhumans.
One of the most frustrating things about that trailer is that Medusa's power is to control her hair like a living organism.
Her
She
wig
can
doesn't
grab
look
things,
great.
it can grow, and it's clearly a wig, and it's just so stationary and flat. Whereas in every comic panel you have ever seen, it is flowing like it's in water, grabbing and reaching and growing. And yeah, she's supposed to be a big deal, a really big deal, and we completely ignore her in this trailer. I don't know if it's just because they didn't have the money to do all the effects for her hair yet or what.
That can't be cheap. Particularly on a TV budget. This is a series coming out from ABC. It is going to be the off-season replacement for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which means that they are making this instead of Agent Carter. Which, fine, okay. I mean, I guess technically they're making this instead of Most Wanted, which was supposed to be the mid-season replacement for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
You're just making her sadder.
I know, none of this is good. I'm so sorry. ABC is making bad choices for you, Sarah.
Okay.
Anyway, what were we talking about? Inhumans. Okay. So, Terrigenesis happens. The mist rolls out. Kamala ends up in her cocoon, breaks free, and discovers that she is different.
Carol Danvers.
I guess.
Before this happens, she is hit by the mist, and she assumes that this bit of vodka in her mouth that she spit out had made her completely drunk. She's like, this is some strong
Very
vodka.
cute.
Because what she sees is a hallucination of Captain Marvel, Captain America, and Iron Man appearing to her.
Iron Man holding a giant winged sloth?
Yeah, and speaking just in puzzles and riddles.
This is the stuffed animal that's on her nightstand as she leaves in the first place, as she sneaks out of the house. So these are the toys that she adores, presumably, and a lot of cute little birds with hats.
This is very Twin Peaks, as Iron Man is saying the yellow mustard is bloomed in every field. The yellow mustard is blooming.
Yeah, I think what Iron Man and Cap are saying is the English translation of whatever it is that Carol Danvers is. I assume it's a song. It sounds like a song or like a psalm or something like that.
It may be, because I do not know anything about this culture. And guys, that's one of the things I love about this comic is all the editor's notes, or maybe it's even from the writer, the notes that will explain things and translate things as you go on. There's not much of it in this first volume, but really in the next few volumes, there's a whole lot of explaining the traditions of the Pakistani family, the Muslim American lifestyle, and the words that they use and the celebrations they have. It's really cool.
Yeah.
But it never turns into exposition comics. It's never supposed to be primarily educational.
Right.
It all serves the story and serves character.
What a Muslim family is, and let us go through and point out all other differences. No, it's just like, this is Kamala's life, and then, oh, you may not know what this is, so let's tell you.
Yeah, and they don't overtly Americanize them just so that I feel comfortable.
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
No, again, we're back to that authenticity right at the heart of the story.
Yes.
Yeah.
So she sees this vision, and they tell her that they are faith and that she is standing at a crossroads. They talk to her about identity, and she confides in them that she doesn't know what she is supposed to do or who she is supposed to be. And Captain Marvel asks who she wants to be. She says, right now, I want to be beautiful and awesome and butt-kicking and less complicated. I want to be you. Except I would wear the classic politically incorrect costume and kick butt in giant wedge heels. Which Captain America replies, you must have some kind of weird boot fetish.
Which is one of my favorite ongoing jokes in this entire trade. Just that, always like, she's Captain Marvel. She's the one with the huge boots.
Nice boots.
Nice boots.
And then Captain Marvel tells her that as fate would have it, she's about to get a total reboot that people only dream about. But it's not going to turn out the way that she thinks. And that's when they leave and say good luck. And she wakes up in the cocoon, breaks her way out, and we end our first issue with her looking just like classic Miss Marvel.
Like
White
classic
skin,
Miss Marvel,
blonde, long hair, in that old outfit.
Yeah, the thigh highs, the leotard, the little scarf wrapped around the waist, the whole thing. It's a good look. I mean, that's a classic costume.
Yeah, I like this callback too to when she was at the convenience store and she was talking about how she admired Zoe, and she said, my chances of becoming an intergalactic superhero are even slimmer than my chances of becoming blonde and popular. Because here she becomes both.
Yeah.
Blonde, popular, Captain Marvel's very popular, and an intergalactic superhero, but she's about to learn it's not what she wants. And this is a great turn in identity when you get everything you want and everything you thought you needed,
And it's still not what you
and
want.
it's not what you want or need.
And can we applaud this comic book for not going to the cheap tragedy means of motivating heroism? Kamala is just a good person. She doesn't need to lose her uncle. She doesn't need a little aphoristic line that we can print on T-shirts telling her that with great power
we
is something,
killed her parents
something.
and she became a hero. No, none of that happened.
We don't need it. She's just good. She just legitimately wants to help people.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, as listeners to Excelsior will know by now, that's very close to my heart. That is the Cap school of heroism, and I am into that.
Yes.
So we start off issue 2, where we left right away.
Jersey City, 12 hours after the Terrigen Bomb.
Kamala looking exactly like Danvers and panicking. She feels sick, transforms back looking normal, and then half transforms into some other super costumed look as she struggles to hold on to this normal look. She finds Zoe and her boyfriend on a dock, and she mentions that when she's around Zoe, she feels like she has to be someone else. She feels small. And while thinking this, she shrinks to bug size.
Yes.
I think that what we get here during these transformation sequences are other alternate costumes for Carol Danvers, other Ms. Marvel, Captain Marvel, Warbird, Binary, whatever other names she's gone by. Carol Danvers has been rebooted more times than the 616
Why
universe.
Binary? That's a weird name.
Well, Carol ended up, because of her connections with the Kree, she ended up in space for a long time. So she was part of Marvel Cosmic, where everyone gets cool space-related code names.
Is Binary a space-related code name?
I mean, binary stars.
Space. I don't know. So Kamala is bug size, and she's seeing these two on the docks, and Zoe falls into the water, panicking, and her boyfriend is too drunk to help her.
Underage drinking is bad, you guys.
And this is where we get this dialogue, this narration from Kamala that I really appreciate, saying there's this ayah, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, from the Quran that my dad always quotes when he sees something bad on TV, a fire or a flood or a bombing. Quote, whoever kills one person, it is as if he killed all of mankind. And whoever saves one person, it is as if he saved all of mankind. When I was a little kid, that always made me feel better because no matter how bad things get, there are always people who rush in to help. And according to my dad, they are blessed.
This is
awesome.
Beautiful.
It's really, really good. Yeah.
And this is where Kamala, with her fighting spirit, figures out at least partially how to use her powers in this moment. And she shouts "Embiggen" and becomes very large, rushes in, enlarges her hand, and just scoops Zoe out of the water along with half of the ground beneath her.
Yep.
Firstly, embiggen is great. It's a perfectly cromulent word. I'm super into that. Do you know the origin of embiggen?
No.
It's from The Simpsons. It's from Jebediah Springfield. A noble spirit embiggens the smallest man. Embiggen, not a real word, but it has become a real word thanks to The Simpsons. Secondly, I want to ask you both, how do Ms. Marvel's powers work for you? We haven't discussed, I think, in the frame of Excelsior, any of the many, many heroes that have this kind of shape-changing ability, this kind of Mr. Fantastic Plastic Man kind of ability.
Yeah, and she definitely is more like some other stretchy characters because she can also change the way she looks, which is something that Mr. Fantastic can't do, I don't think. At least
there have been some stories where he's been able to do it for like a little while, but yeah, that's not generally part of his power set.
I think usually changing shape, but like then changing your hair color and these things, I think that's a little bit different maybe. So she has a very unique perspective there, but she very much so is that plastic, rubbery, stretching kind. What I do appreciate really a lot about it is that she's going to be using this moniker Miss Marvel, but she is a legacy character because of that, but she doesn't carry on any of Miss Marvel's power set.
Yeah.
She doesn't carry on anything about Miss Marvel except for she looks up to her and sees this as a name to use because she's doing good in the world.
Sarah, as someone who's relatively new to comics, how do you feel about legacy titles and legacy characters? Are you interested in the fact that there have been 7 Green Lanterns and there have been 17
no, I don't
Green
care about that
Lanterns?
at all.
Or, so many Flashes, a bushel full of Flashes?
A bushel full of Flashes. No, I'm really into it because it really does remind me of like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. There's one girl in all the world and she is the Slayer and there's always going to be a Slayer.
That's an excellent legacy title.
Yeah. It was like the first legacy title ever. But no, it totally works for me. I mean, I realize that like we continuously reboot, the superhero world and we're constantly like unfreezing Cap and reintroducing all these characters and like resetting absolutely everything. But realistically, within the fiction of these universes, Cap is going to get old and die and we're going to need a new Captain America. And why not? Why not continue using that title? Why not continue using that name that inspires, fear into the hearts of evil and inspires people to like stand up and do good and be strong? Like I'm wicked into it. I love that idea.
Yeah. And for me, one of my favorite of all the legacy titles is Miles Morales Spider-Man. And what that character did was Spider-Man Peter Parker grew up. Yeah. He went from being a nerdy teenager to a businessman. Of course, he had time in between there where he was a teacher. We should go back to that. I really like Peter Parker as a poor teacher.
Peter Parker as a teacher is great. Yeah.
But now he's a rich businessman, and he's dealing with worldwide conflicts. Thanks, Dan Slott. And Dan Slott, to his benefit, is doing these amazing, long, stretched out, epic stories with Spider-Man. But that's not what I go to Spider-Man for, and that's not where Spider-Man came from. So it's good that we have that, but it's perfect to get a legacy character here. Miles Morales, the teenager who is dealing with the problems that we used to see Spider-Man deal with, dealing with going to school, being very smart, dealing with, do I tell my parents I'm a superhero? How do I live this life in contrast with my real teenage life? And Miles Morales has been so perfect in doing that, especially since it's no longer just a white character doing it. We're now getting a relation to people in the world who aren't just the characters we've seen for such a long time, but now we're reaching out to new people.
There was always an argument that Peter Parker should have not been white anyway. A poor kid growing up in the middle of Queens, even in the 1960s, would probably not have been white anyway, but it works really beautifully. And I think you're right. Miles to Peter Parker is very similar to Kamala to Carol Danvers. It's that same kind of, we have seen a template for heroism. And though, of course, Miles has very similar powers to Peter, you know, he is a Spider-Man in a more authentic sense. Kamala's heroification, I don't know how you turn that word into a verb, but I'm going to say heroification of Carol Danvers really works. She is a guiding light. She is a principle here that can be followed and emulated.
No, and I think it's really good too, because then you get to like instead of it just being like, oh, okay, well, we're stuck with Peter Parker in high school again. We've been doing that since like, 40 whatever years ago. Like, it's like, okay, well, here's a new kid who is in high school dealing with similar things, but also a different person. And so has different, you're able to tell similar but different stories.
Exactly right.
And I don't know, like I said, I love the idea. I mean, it totally works for me. And I really, it would be super interesting to be like, here are the Legacy Avengers. Here's your whole new slot of Legacy Avengers. And it's not Steve Rogers and Natasha Romanoff and all these other people. It's like all these new folks who have the same superhero title, but then are slightly different.
And we've done stories like that in the past within the frame of the 616, but the problem is that because the core 616 still has to continue, these are only ever going to be fringe stories. And when they're not mainstream Marvel continuity, they just don't survive. It's almost impossible.
Or it's like a bad Disney XD cartoon where it's like, here are the children of the Avengers. No, this is terrible. Please don't do this to me.
I want to call out a beautiful thing here in the art on the page where everyone, when we get that great quote that I used at the beginning, oh my God, your old costume, it looks great. The expression on Kamala's face in that middle panel, and then again on the next page when she says disembiggen and shrinks her hand down again, that is Kamala's expression.
Yes.
That little pursed-lipped half frown of concentration, that is, we see that on Kamala's face all the time. And here we see it on her even when she is presenting herself as Carol Danvers. Beautifully done.
Yeah. So a group of kids surround her asking for Captain Marvel's autograph and commenting on her classic look. They ask what's up with the giant hand, and Kamala runs away, disembiggening her hand at a safe distance from the crowd and feeling very proud of herself for having been able to do so. She then walks away contemplating what has happened and thinking about how this outfit doesn't fit her. This isn't who she wants to be. It's exhausting. And she thinks about then what actually makes her happy about what just happened. And she says, what made me happy was seeing Zoe take a breath of air. Even though she makes everybody feel like crap, I'm glad I was there. I'm glad she lived.
This heroism is incredibly touching, is incredibly profound. As I said, with any other character, we would have some minor tragedy motivating this change. She wouldn't have saved Zoe. Zoe would have died. She would have regretted that failure to take action, and that would have made her resolve to be more heroic in the future. We just don't get that. No. She deconstructs heroism beautifully. Yeah. And this, I think, is most important because it is giving a huge amount of agency and empowerment to a 16-year-old girl.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And we go back to that thing about identity, as she's saying, maybe putting on a costume doesn't make you brave. Maybe it's something else.
Yeah.
And she's thinking about who she is and how being Carol Danvers isn't what gave her power there.
Yeah.
So she does sneak back into her bedroom window, still looking like Carol Danvers for the moment, and her brother hears her coming in and checks on her, and she freaks out. But to her surprise, when the lights come on, she looks normal again. And then I really like her brother saying, now I'm worried. Did something happen? Is everything okay? And she's like, yeah, something happened really, really weird. And he says, it's going to be okay. I'll get the brothers from the mosque and we'll beat the ever-loving snot out of whoever hurt you. And she's like, what? No, it's not like that. I'm fine. He goes, oh, okay. Then in that case, you're screwed because your parents heard you. Yeah. And they come walking in.
Yeah.
Turns out Bruno got really worried about Kamala and called her parents. Kamala realizes she can't tell her parents.
Bruno
what
is a good
happened.
boy. Bruno
He
did the
is.
right thing.
He is.
Bruno is a good boy.
We have to think about this. This is kind of hard to catch on the comic, but if you know about the Terrigenesis, she was probably in that cocoon for a while. She's been gone from the party
12
for
hours.
quite a while.
The caption tells us 12 hours after the Terrigen Bomb. That's
Right.
how long
So-
she was
so
out.
Bruno-
So
Wow,
it
I
is
read that. How
probably
did I
dawn
not
by
pick
now.
that up?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Bruno has been looking around for it, and I don't think that's 12 hours since the mist came out. That's not necessarily 12 hours since she's been in the
Perhaps
cocoon.
not, but certainly
Because
probably
it's still
hours have
nighttime,
passed.
but
Yeah.
probably most of the night.
Yeah.
She left early night, and this is probably in the morning here.
Yeah.
She's coming back, and Bruno's been out there looking for her and just gave up, being very worried, and called her parents.
Yeah.
And Kamala realizes she can't tell her parents what happened, so she apologizes and says that she's trying to work through some things, and her family grounds her. And calls it the night. She looks at her Captain Marvel poster, which I really like because it's the new
It's the
Captain
Rosie the
Marvel.
Riveter.
Yeah.
Yes, which I love.
The cover that they just released
Yeah.
just before this one, poster on the wall there, and she lifts her fists in the air and she says, "Maybe I'm finally part of something bigger."
Yes.
And I like it because her fist is so giant in the panel. It's just so great.
It's excellent.
And that's the end of issue 2. So we start out issue 3 with Zoe being on the news for having been rescued by a, quote, girl dressed as Miss Marvel. And Zoe says, "If Miss Marvel hadn't been there, I would be totally dead right now. I feel like I've learned so much from her about responsibility and helping people and stuff."
I hate Zoe.
The news anchor then says, Carol Danvers, a.k.a. Captain Marvel, has not used her Ms. Marvel alias or costume for the past several years. Could this be a copycat? Is a new costumed superhero patrolling Jersey City? The Avengers could not be reached for comment. And you think, this must happen all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
How many people dress up like Cap and just walk down the street?
Yeah.
I'm sure this is a frequent problem for Tony
Right.
Stark's Avengers PR department.
This is just like your normal nightly news. This is a segment on the news. So the Miss Marvel lookalike is all that anyone is talking about, and Kamala can't find any info on Google to help her figure out what is going on with this transformation that she has gone through.
I love that she Googles polymorph and embiggening.
Yep.
Come on, interwebs, don't fail me now. I can't be the first person this has happened to. You almost certainly aren't, in fact.
Yes, not in this universe. She goes with her brother to the Saturday Youth lecture at their mosque. There's a dividing wall that keeps the women separated from the men, but the speaker still hears Kamala talking to Nakia and asks him not to talk during the lecture. Nakia convinces Kamala to go to get a squishy at the Circle Q with her, noting that since the barrier is there, no one will notice that they're even gone. Kamala tries to talk to Nakia about what happened, but not wanting to reveal exactly what happened in detail makes getting advice on it very difficult.
Yes.
Bruno is working at the queue, though, and Kamala, still angry at him, decides she doesn't want that squishy anymore and leaves.
Right before that, we get this great exchange between Kamala and Nakia, where Kamala says, either that or I'm going to have the most amazing life any girl from Jersey City ever had. Nakia says, oh my God, you totally kissed a boy.
Ew, what? No!
Which is so good.
Yeah.
She's really 16. She really feels like a teenage girl. It's perfect.
Yeah.
I do like that you get these moments with Bruno. It's very evident and clear at the beginning that Bruno very much so likes Kamala and is
yes.
somewhat in love.
Yes.
Earlier at the party, she says, "Oh, if only you were
Pakistani, my family would be throwing me at you."
Throw me at you in marriage." And she's like. And he's like, "Oh yeah, that would be terrible, I guess." And then here, as she runs away from the Circle Q, seeing him, he's like, "Bye," and he's just in his eyes. The art is so perfect, like longing after her. Like,
So
what happened?
expressive.
Did I do something? Oh no!
Yeah.
It's great. I love it. At school on Monday, Kamala is trying to research what these newfound powers might be and how they work, but she keeps coming up with World of Battlecraft strategy guides when she searches. Bruno is distressed that Kamala is ignoring him, and his brother is bugging him to take $100 from the Circle Q. We see that Bruno is very, very smart and is working on a project to help him get into a good university. His brother, on the other hand, thinks that taking money from Bruno's job isn't actually stealing because he works there.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, Vic.
Here we get Bruno inventing unstable molecules so that Kamala can have a costume for the rest of the series.
I'm into it.
It's-
Super
I
snot.
kind of like it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
And that goes on to be a big thing with Bruno's character in much later volumes.
Yeah.
Where we are now in the comics, him being very smart will be essential in where he goes as a character.
Sure.
So Kamala's hand starts changing size, and she freaks out in class and runs for cover in the locker rooms at school. Trying to control her size changing, she smashes up the place and is caught by a teacher after she normalizes. She gets detention for being in the locker rooms during class hours. So she's grounded and is now has detention as well.
Yes, and turned into her mom for a little bit,
Yes.
which is
Yeah.
great. Yeah, it's interesting how her powers seem to be very closely tied into like her comfort level and like what her emotions are. I mean, like in case this isn't obvious, I'm wicked all about power sets that have to do with like emotional control. It
Yeah.
really speaks
Yeah.
to me on like a deep dark level, and so I really love that about Kamala and love seeing her growing to be able to control these powers more. It's really excellent.
And to see her approach this power set with real intelligence, to experiment and to really be able to figure out things about herself based on her observation and the help of Dr. Google. I mean,
Yes.
she's just great.
During detention, Bruno texts Kamala and really wants to fix things between them. And she decides to go stop by the queue and talk things over, realizing that he is the only one in her life who she might be able to talk to about everything that's going on.
Kamala's grounding, like being grounded, is very loosey-goosey, I feel like. I mean, her parents straight up were like, you got school and you got home, and that's it. But here she is, like, she's in detention, and now she's just going to go over to the Circle Q, and like...
Well, to be fair, she apparently had a phone conversation in detention with her mother screaming at her.
Yes, true.
So they might think she's still in detention as she goes to the Circle Q here. When she does arrive at the Circle Q, Bruno is being held at gunpoint. She contemplates what to do just outside the door, which I really like. She thinks to call 911. She looks at her phone and it says, LOL, no battery.
That's what my phone says all the time.
I just want that to be my lock screen now. That's pretty good.
Meanwhile, inside, we see that the robber is actually Bruno's brother, who thought Bruno's coworker would be working instead, and he was going to rob the place. Bruno scolds his brother, saying he doesn't even know how to use a gun, and his brother admits that it's not even loaded. But he says things are going to change when the inventor comes. Kamala realizes she is now a superhero and doesn't need the police. She transforms into Captain Marvel and rushes in, grabbing Bruno's brother and not hearing Bruno as he tries to explain. Having squeezed Bruno's brother, the gun goes off with a bang as Kamala drops Bruno's brother and to her knees, having been shot in the gut.
Yeah.
There was a bullet
This
in
is
the chamber,
terrifying.
which I really like because this is like one of the most common things with guns. Someone thinking it's not loaded, but you always have to check the chamber of
Yeah.
the gun because there could be a bullet in the chamber, even if the clip's not in the gun.
Vic is the worst. I
Vic
mean,
is
just
an
the
idiot.
worst. I don't know about Bruno's home life. I don't know how one family raised these two kids, but good God, he's just terrible. But again, I love Kamala's impulse to help. I love Kamala rushes in. This is perfect for her.
Yeah. And I like Bruno, the way he like panics there. He's like, Miss, Captain, whoever, you're shot. Like she doesn't know. And that's the end. We get this caption box that says, this was not what I planned,
Yeah.
to say the least.
And then we play fair as we open the fourth issue because this is going to be an important part of Kamala's power set here. It's pretty great.
Yeah. So as issue 4 opens up, Bruno calls for an ambulance. He tells his brother to get out of there, and his brother takes off. But Kamala stops him, saying, no ambulance. Don't. And she says, they can't see me. I'm not Miss Marvel. And he's like, sorry, Captain Marvel. And she's like, no, Bruno, it's me. And he says, yeah, I know. I saw you yesterday on the news. But then she transforms back to Kamala and says, no, it's me, Kamala. And Bruno drops the phone in surprise. And Kamala realizes she healed when she transformed back.
Yeah. And she gets this great line. I have to hide. The police, they can't know it's me. My parents will freak. The NSA will wiretap our mosque or something, and then they'll sell me to science.
Probably true. Good
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
story,
No, if your
actually.
daughter gets superpowers, you are obliged to sell her to science.
Well, I don't know.
You could just call 1-800-SCIENCE.
I feel like if you live in the 616 universe, anytime somebody gets powers, it's just like, oh, we'll just call another superhero to like mentor you, right? Like,
Yeah. Or you call Phil Coulson and he puts you on the index.
yes.
These are the things that happen. Yes.
Is there an index in the 616?
There have been indices in the 616, yes.
okay.
But as far
wait,
as I
isn't
know,
that what Civil War was about?
yeah, it's kind of, yes. And
Sort of.
certainly S.H.I.E.L.D. has had lists of people. And, of course, Doom has archives on every powered individual in
Dr.
the... Weirdly, you love Dr. Doom.
I have a
odd
weird
affection.
affection for Dr. Doom and Clint Barton. Like, I love them very, very much.
Do you ship them?
No, absolutely not.
Why not?
What? Well, because I ship
You wouldn't want
Clint,
that for Clint. Like,
because I ship Clint Barton with Laura Barton from Age of Ultron, and I don't know who I shipped him with. I did like Children's Crusade when he almost married Wanda, but I don't know. He's got like a weird thing with his mom, so
Yep. So this is the part in the comic where we see the magazine stand in the back, which has a dozen amazing titles on it, one of which is Dropkick Magazine. And I actually shout out to Mr. Liparota on Twitter. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but we had an extensive conversation about how we want to make this magazine into a real thing.
Dropkick enthusiast.
It's going to be fantastic.
God, that would be amazing.
We get to do that. But then the police come, and Kamala realizes she can't transform without the injury returning. So she covers her face with a sleeping mask, which I really like that panel where she's standing there and there's the two holes in the sleeping mask. It's so amazing. It's one of the best panels. She tells the officers basically exactly what happened, leaving out the part that they know who was robbing the store.
Yeah.
She shows them that she can grow and that she was shot, but she's okay. They leave, and Bruno tells Kamala that he's worried about his brother, that he's in some sort of trouble mixed up with someone known as the Inventor.
When the police leave, we get the larger of the two cops saying, interesting, expect a subpoena for today's security tapes. I'll be keeping an eye on this place. While the other cop says, costume kid these days, I tell you, my buddy in Brooklyn took a call once because a guy was shooting arrows off his roof. Know who he was? Hawkeye. Hawkeye, again, continuing his starring role here in the Excelsior Expanded Universe.
It's Hawkeye and Howard the Duck.
Can we just go like one episode without having to bring up Clint Barton?
Absolutely not.
Howard?
No. No, we cannot. It's actually in your contract.
Oh, I should have read more carefully. Curse you, paperwork.
The tiny white tiny print.
So Bruno and Kamala have a very sweet talk about how Bruno has always protected Kamala, but now she has powers. Now she is stronger, and that she can help her friends with these powers. She whips up a costume.
That always works for me. By the way, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I mean, like, that kind of thing always gets me whenever it's like, no, you've always protected me. Now I'm protecting you. Like, yes, I'm into that
good.
thing.
That's
Absolutely.
real good.
Yeah.
She whips up a costume at home and sneaks out again. Where we get this narration dialogue between the two. Vic's been hanging around an abandoned house out in Greenville. He doesn't know I know. I pulled the GPS data off his cell. And Kamala's...
You mean you opened up the Maps app and then looked at the last place he'd been?
Oh, come on, dude. Let me feel like a secret agent for a minute. She shows up where Vic is, and two cronies outside tell her that he is being held in the basement, but she better not go in there. She heads in and fights off some weird flying laser drones before finding Vic in the basement. She tells him that she is there to save him, and then is confronted by a new baddie who is helpfully wearing a shirt that says, I'm a bad guy.
And has like a weird laser pistol slung across his hip.
And
He
he
sure
asks,
does.
how do you plan to do that? And that's the end of issue 4.
It's really good. Kamala deciding to go and find Vic to help him. This is, again, just genuine heroism.
Yeah.
It might feel, I think, if you're used to more traditional superheroics, it may feel as though the plot here is a little incidental. Kamala is undermotivated in this primary plot unless you understand who Kamala is.
Yes.
This is emerging from her character, not from circumstance. And you have to be so sure of the character that you're writing in order for that to work.
Yeah.
And to me, it never feels false. It never feels hollow.
Right.
I'm always completely convinced by who Kamala is. Sarah, where does Kamala rank for you on your list of kick-ass heroines that you want to be when you grow up?
Oh man, well, I mean, I'm already too old to be Kamala, so no, I mean, like, I really, really enjoy her. I love that she is capital G good. I mean, that speaks to me a lot. I love that they have not only presented like this woman who is capital G good and just wants to fight the good fight, but also that like it's a girl, it's a 16-year-old girl who just wants to not just be a hero for the glory of it. I mean, she could have continued masquerading as Carol Danvers, and she decided, no, that's not what it's about. It's about, you know, what you choose to do and the choices you make, and it's about deciding to be good and then remaining herself while doing that thing. I mean, gosh, pretty high, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, I adore her. I would love to see her hanging out with some of the other girls that like are just kicking so much ass and just. But the other thing
Little
is that
Patsy Walker, little
for sure, yeah,
Squirrel Girl.
She probably could hang out. But like, here's the thing: is that like I think that Kamala could hang with like Squirrel Girl and Patsy Walker and like be pretty good. But I mean, like I feel like if you tried to put her up against like I don't know Black Widow or Wanda, those chicks are jaded as hell. Like I think they are far beyond the pale of like doing good for the sake of doing good.
We are actually seeing that conflict play out in Secret Empire, where Black Widow is leading the champions on an assassination mission for Captain America.
I have to come over and read those comics.
And she is trying to get them to do this thing, but the champions, of course, are like, no, we're pure and good. We'll help you because we want to see this end. but there's certain things we won't do. And there's certain moments like where Black Widow is trying to torture somebody and Kamala's like, what are you doing? Stop.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting.
She's
No,
an
absolutely,
idealist.
yeah.
That always speaks to me.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so, but I quite like Kamala. I mean, there is a tender soft spot in my heart for kick-ass women who are a little bit beyond the pale and are willing to do like, you know, the bad stuff in order to get the good stuff done. But I mean, like, I think that Kamala is right up there with Diana Prince, with Wonder Woman, who it's like, it's not just about, you know, doing the thing so the thing gets done. It's about doing the thing because it's the right thing to do.
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
a great point of comparison. I hadn't thought of that, but you're right.
So issue 5 picks up right at that very moment. Miss Marvel tries to fight her way out, but there are too many laser drones and she's been shot by Doyle, the I'm a bad guy shirt guy. She realizes she's taking on too much. She can't heal, stay embiggened, and fight. Realizing she can't win this time, she disembiggens, shrinking down and sneaking out, running home.
That has to suck, right?
Yeah.
Like whenever you
Yeah.
feel like, no, I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to do this thing. And then like you realize that you're losing the fight. Like,
Yeah, you finally felt like you can do some good in this world. You have this power and you lose.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a big deal. She sneaks back home. She raids the refrigerator starving because
she eats everything, everything in the
fridge.
refrigerator.
Because as she figures out here, her healing and transforming and stretching is all taking a lot of energy from her and she needs food to revitalize. Then she gets caught by her parents. Her mother begins to lose it, but her father steps in, sweetly talking to her, encouraging her, telling her that he is afraid, that the world is a dangerous place that tells girls that they must be things that they are not, and they must do things that they don't want to do. He tells her that he named her Kamala because it means perfection.
Yeah.
She doesn't have to be somebody else to impress anybody. She is perfect.
This is I adore this scene. I adore this conversation between her and her father. Her father talking about how after her mother had Amir, her older brother, they were told that they couldn't have children anymore, and then they got pregnant again, and so had Kamala. And I love this. I love that he legitimately is looking out for her and that he understands. You know, the world wants to turn you into something that maybe you don't want to be, but you feel pressured to do that thing. So you know, just tell us what's going on. Tell us what's going on. But of course, we can't just have our super powered protagonist just like tell her folks, hey, I have powers now, you know?
Yeah.
If this is undermotivated in any way, I think it is that. We're holding on to the idea of costumed superheroics because that's such a staple of the 616.
Sure.
Maybe we wouldn't need to do that.
I do think it makes sense, though. 16-year-old girl living her own life, trying to do things that her parents aren't going to agree with. She's not going to think they're going to agree with her being a superhero.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, that's probably
That's fair.
fair. I try to think about like if I at 16 had suddenly gained superpowers. I think you're right. I
Sarah,
don't think
we all think about that all the time.
Thank you.
And she does mention that it occurred to her to tell them, but through circumstance of what was happening, and it's all
Sure,
barreled
yeah.
up,
I'm already
she
grounded.
decided
I already
not
have
to.
detention. Already all this other stuff is going on. I
Right.
can't also say, by the way, embiggen.
Yeah, and then they do some really cool things with this in the coming volumes where she actually goes back and visits her homeland, has some talks with her mother, and some really interesting stuff happens with her family. I really
that's so
encourage everyone
exciting.
to continue on with this series because some really cool stuff happens.
This is a great monologue that she gets after the conversation with her father. Perfect just the way I am? I hope so. Because I've gotten Vic into even more trouble and I've got to get him out. Abu was right. Bruno was right. I'm not here to be a watered down version of some other hero. I'm here to be the best version of Kamala.
God,
Right,
she's
exactly.
so good.
This is
so
our
good.
3-beat right here. Kamala started out not knowing who she was supposed to be. She became what she thought she was supposed to be and realized that was terrible. Now she realized who she is and what she needs to be and must only embrace who she is. Not a watered down version of another hero, but the best version of herself.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. That speaks to me so much.
I do like also that while her father did have that really sweet moment with her, as soon as he ends it, he's like, also, you're grounded more and you have to talk to the guy down at the mosque. And you
Yeah.
want to talk to him. And she's like, way to ruin the moment, Dad. I mean, you know, a good father.
Yes.
Yeah, it's unfortunate we're not going to get to that conversation in this volume, but
Right.
I love that conversation when it rolls around. It's
Yeah.
very,
Yeah.
very good.
Which I really like of going back to this scene in the mosque. And again, being someone who doesn't know a lot about this religion and the traditions involved in it, I do appreciate that when he is lecturing, Kamala is like, oh, but why is this barrier even here? You've said this. And she knows her stuff and she's smart. She knows
Yeah.
about her religion and the history of it. And she can have a dialogue about it. And I really like that about the character a lot.
Yes. Yeah. Kamala is smart for sure.
So the next day, Kamala convinces Bruno to use the polymer that he's been working on for scholarship to help her with her outfit changing size. And she trains with Bruno that day to learn control of her powers in a heroic montage. I really like when she has her legs really stretched up. She's been running and she's like, was I faster that time? And he says, technically, you're not faster. Technically, you grew longer legs, took bigger strides. But yeah, technically, 17.5 seconds faster.
I really like Bruno. I really like Bruno.
Oh, man. And that's another thing. Continuing on, we will learn more about Bruno, I think, in like 2 volumes past this. And his story will just wrench your heart. It's wonderful. It's my favorite. So that night, she tries her rescue again. She shrinks down, sneaks up to the safe house, and comes blasting into it, the basement, riding the drones, one of the drones specifically, and shooting the bad guy shirt Doyle guy with its laser.
And she's wearing her new outfit that she made now.
Yes.
And she looks great. I love her character design very much. It's so good. Yeah.
It's wonderful. She grabs Vic and begins and blasts through the doors in a mad rushed escape. Mm-hmm. The next day, there is a stuffed mock Miss Marvel hanging dead from the newly restored Circle Q, and the window says, "The Birdman cometh." A note that could also be seen the first time she visited the safe house hideout, written on the wall. Miss Marvel is there as the citizens passing by ask what it could mean, and she says it's a message, quote, "for us. This guy thinks that he can threaten us where we live. Miss Marvel has a message for him. This is Jersey City. We talk loud, we walk fast, and we don't take any disrespect. Don't mess." And she walks away in a stretched leg stride. The crowd goes, "Huh?" And someone goes, "Word." Later, the bad guy t-shirt guy, Doyle, is taken to meet the inventor, known as Mr. Edison.
He only owns one tank top, apparently. Just the I'm a bad guy tank top.
Poor Doyle.
I mean,
Poor Doyle. No wonder he's a bad guy.
If I was a bad guy and I had that tank top, this would be the only one I would wear. Mr. Edison sits in the room with his chair turned away from Doyle. Doyle apologizes for losing Vic, but he's dealing with the problem, he says. And Mr. Edison replies, "You haven't created a problem. You've created an urban legend." He swivels around, revealing his bird-like face and fists, and exclaims, "The legend ends now." And I wonder if he's related to Howard the Duck.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Why does this keep happening? Why is our podcast secretly about anthropomorphic birdmen?
That was a little
God,
forced.
we're going to have to do Harvey Birdman, attorney at law.
And while this is the end of the main story here, it does end with the volume in the point 1 story, the introducer. And basically what we have
The title
here
of
is,
which, okay, let me read. This took me
go ahead, yeah.
so long to try and parse.
Okay.
Like, I stared for a long time at this. All new Marvel Now, point 1, number 1.
Yep.
What?
So here's what happened. Before this, you had Marvel point 1, number 1. And then a year and a half, somewhat later, you had all new Marvel Now point 1. Number 1.
Oh my
and
God.
then a year and a half after this, you had all new, all different Marvel Now point 1, number 1.
This is even worse.
Thanks, Marvel.
This is so much. I mean, this is like on par with that final issue in the Mockingbird run that was like the Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. 50th anniversary, super secret, ultra special, Mockingbird, Bobby Moore, blah, blah. And it just went on and on and on. And it's like, what the hell is wrong with your naming conventions? Just call it, I mean, like, it's the exact opposite of when you're working on like an audio file and it's like final 1, final 2. I swear to God, last final.
And then you just reboot to version 1.
Version 1. Delete
All new,
all other
all
versions.
different. Version 1.
All different version 1. Now point 1, number 1. Mockingbird.
In the point 1, this is a follow-up, like I mentioned at the beginning. This is like a 5.5, even though it's an introduction to Kamala Khan.
So they really literally just did this to introduce Kamala Khan to the public.
Yes, the point 1, that's all it is. It's like a mixtape to introduce different characters,
That's
different stories
so
that they're going to be doing. So she starts off with Miss Marvel fighting a monstrous crane in a junkyard dump of some sort, but is called by family, and the shout from the phone tells her that she is late for her cousin's Mindy, which means pre-wedding party, which again, we're learning some words. I'm not sure how to pronounce them, but I know how to spell it now. She runs off, shouting at the crane to tell the inventor that this isn't over. She leaps to the Circle Q, where Bruno has her clothing for the party. And I really like when she puts it on, it says, superhero costume plus 5 to dexterity. And then she says, again, pronunciation, I don't know, shalwar kameez plus 5 to bling, which shalwar kameez means Pakistani clothing.
She looks great. It's a really beautiful outfit.
Yeah.
She shows up to the party late and smelling of garbage. Her mother gets onto her about...
If I had a nickel.
Yeah, right?
If I had a stinky nickel.
Stinky nickel. Her mother gets onto her about not telling her where she is and what she is doing. Kamala says, how can I? If every time I color out of the line slightly, you freak out. The two argue back and forth, and Kamala's mother ends the argument by saying, if you want to argue, we can do it every night for the rest of the month because you're grounded. And Kamala gets a mischievous look on her face, muttering, want to bet? Ooh. And that's the end of our volume.
That's
today.
the end, yeah.
I want to do something that we don't normally do, and I want to talk a little about the next issue because I assumed that the first volume of Ms. Marvel contained the first 6 issues because most of them do. It doesn't. It contains the first 5 plus the bonus issue. So I went back and read issue 6, which I adore.
Because that's when Wolverine shows up.
That's when Wolverine shows up,
And
when
mentors
Kamala is in the sewer dealing with sword-wielding alligators. No kidding. It's a pretty great sequence. Yeah. Wolverine shows up and Wolverine attacks her, first of all, and ends up vaulting over her when he realizes that she is not, in fact, a villain. And the captions read, wow, such athletic, very claws, so amazed. And that is so perfectly 2014.
And G. Willow Wilson's very good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's the next volume where she will actually get to meet the Inhuman family, the royal family. She will get to learn more about her Inhuman heritage and that side of her identity and what's going on, learn some more about her powers and really how she fits in the world as a superhero now, and that mentoring from Wolverine. It's such a fantastic issue. She meets Lockjaw the dog, and she gets Lockjaw basically as a pet. She will take Lockjaw on walks and such, even to this day. It's pretty fantastic.
I really want to do one of the, 17 stories in which Wolverine mentors a young woman coming to terms with her powers because he is weirdly very, very good at that. I mean, we saw that a little in the Logan movie, the first episode of Excelsior, when he's mentoring Laura, but he has been doing this for most of his time in comics.
This is a characteristic for Wolverine that has been there since almost the beginning, where he will come alongside a young female superhero and mentor her. There's no...
He will do it gruffly and he will do it reluctantly, but he will do it very, very well.
No, this is... Okay, so this is like the better version of Nick Fury, who has a habit of like taking like really talented young women under his wing and then, I don't know, just like ruining their lives.
Yeah. Wolverine does a good job.
He does, mostly by saying, you don't want to be like me. I understand how this thing should be done.
What we need is a story where we've got Logan and Nick Fury who are like given like parentage over a girl, and it's like the Odd Couple plus 2 men and a baby. Like
Marvel, that's commonroomradio@gmail.com. You can get in touch and hire Sarah for very reasonable rates. Vinton and I will only take, 75%, 80% of her fee. It'll be fine.
So that is the first trade of Ms. Marvel, and it's great and it's wonderful and it's lovely, and I highly recommend it. It's really just sweet and pure and beautiful and just capital G good.
Yeah. And also important. I mean, we discussed very briefly right at the beginning that Ms. Marvel, Kamala, was a character created by a pair of editors. She didn't come from a writer's pitch, which is the way that most new characters are created. Yeah. Marvel was actively trying to increase diversity in their cast of characters. And that is something that I think should legitimately be applauded. It doesn't always work, and sometimes there are stumbles, and sometimes there are horrifying misfires, but Kamala Khan is not one of those.
No, she is an absolute success.
Knock it out of the park success.
Yes, absolutely. So next week, we are doing Spider-Man Homecoming. I'm super duper stoked. I'm not nearly as stoked as Vinton. Vinton, how stoked are you on a scale of 1 to infinity?
Infinity, I guess.
Infinity?
But I'm going, I already got my ticket with a assigned seat, so I don't have to wait in line. I can just go in and sit down in my seat that I bought to see it Thursday night.
Yes.
Before I go to bed. And I'm going to go home and go to bed and then wake up and see it again with you guys.
At 9:30 in the morning. Yes.
So it'll be the last thing I do before sleep and the first thing I do after.
Yes.
So we'll try and record that episode that Friday. We will definitely record it before the episode is supposed to drop on Monday.
Sure.
But yes, if you want to hear our thoughts on Spider-Man Homecoming, you've got like 4 days to go and watch it after it's released on Thursday, I guess.
Yeah.
Don't sleep on that.
Yeah.
It's apparently pretty good. I think it has a perfect score on Rotten Tomatoes right now.
Which is ridiculous. I'm sorry, Rotten what?
Very British.
Rotten Tomatoes.
I mean, Vinny, you're going on vacation for like 3 weeks, right?
I sure am.
Yeah, so we'll figure something out.
We'll do something,
we'll improvise something. It's
no, maybe we'll have Elizabeth on. Maybe we'll do like a Peggy Carter show. Maybe we'll do... I don't know. We'll find something.
You know, if all else fails, you and I can sit down. We can read a comic book. We can make this whole thing work. I mean, it won't be as good without the back of the VHS thing. I'm definitely not going to try and emulate that.
So we're going to get all of that figured out. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you for joining us for the show. If you like what we do over here, if you want to interact with us, you can do so on Twitter at ExcelsiorCast. You can find me personally at Sarah K. Bazant.
You can find me at Paper Bullets.
And you can find me at Flesh Eater and hear more from me from the Read Brave Comics podcast, which I had Alistair come on again.
I was on that podcast.
That's right. This past episode, giving his history of comics. Comics, and friend Emily Savage was my co-host.
Who was so good.
She's
wonderful.
so
such
perfect.
a
I love
great
her.
episode. I
Yeah.
absolutely loved it. Can't recommend it highly enough.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
If you like what we do over here, if you want to support us, then all you have to do is go over to patreon.com/Common Room Radio, where you can kick us $1 a month or whatever you can afford, and we can make more shows like this, and you'll get access to gag reels, which there's a lot from this episode. So enjoy that. You're welcome. So until next week, I'm Sarah K. Bazan.
I'm Alistair Stevens.
And I'm Vinton Bain, and I always thought that if I had amazing hair, if I could pull off great boots, if I could fly, that would make me feel strong. That would make me happy. But the hair gets in my face, the boots pinch, and this leotard is giving me an epic wedgie.
You didn't need to wear it for the podcast, man.
Oh.
Excelsior!